In this podcast, we'll talk about nutritional bulking. So we're going into a calorie surplus. How do we actually do it properly? And is it worthwhile doing it at all in the first place? What are the benefits that you'll get out of it? And just a quick note before we go any further, if you prefer content that is more concise, more straightforward, more to the point, fewer tangents, potentially fewer rambles, although how you don't like a ramble or a tangent is beyond me. Then I have another channel where I aim just to provide more concise, straightforward, to the point content. And it's done with an interesting background, so you don't have to look at me or my gym or part of my gym behind me. And it's just an alternative for you if you want it in the description below. Otherwise, stick around, you might enjoy this, and who knows, you might actually gain a tip or two. Hi, I'm Simon from the Deep South Experiment podcast. Here we talk about muscle gain, fat loss, and the mindset that glues it all together. Feel free to subscribe, to like or comment if you like that kind of content. So one of the big things for me with nutrition around bulking and entering a surplus in order to help pack on that muscle is that muscle grows at such a slow rate, especially if you get to the point in your journey where bulking is appropriate for you. Then the rate in which you gain muscle has likely slowed down and is a little harder to get, especially as you age going forward and all those sorts of wonderful things. So how can you actually attribute a number of calories or a particular surplus, if it's small or whatever, to the muscle that you've gained? And how do you actually detect that you've gained that muscle at all? Or is it more of a feeling that you've gained the muscle? Perhaps it's that you've got a bit leaner, that you've lost a bit of water, you rest and recovered nicely and refreshed and you just feel better. Or have you actually grown a couple of pounds of muscle? That's a question to consider. We know that chemically speaking, 3,500 calories is equal to 1 gram of fat, but we don't have such a method of muscle building. We can't say that we consume 3,500 calories and therefore we gain a gram of muscle. It all depends on such a wide variety of factors as to whether or not we've gained muscle or not, or how to gain muscle in the first place. And another problem I find, and this is slightly comical I think, is that some people use the fact that they're now bulking as an excuse to eat huge amounts of food. They'll sit down at a restaurant or maybe at home, maybe a campsite, who knows, maybe the front lawn, and they'll eat a huge number of calories. They'll often be cheat foods rather than a huge number of calories of healthy whole foods. And they'll say, oh, I'm bulking, so therefore I can eat this. And that's fine. That might be what that person needs to do to handle the various psychological challenges that come along with weight training and improving your physique and so forth. But then the danger of that is that you've eaten so many calories at one go, then you are going to experience a lot of fat accumulation. And if you do that over a long period of time, be it sporadically or consistently within a time period, then you are going to gain a lot of body fat. And then the question becomes, does that body fat actually disappear on its own, or does that body fat disappear at a cost of muscle? And then if you're losing all the muscle or a percentage of it that you've gained in a time period while losing body fat, then the net gain would be negligible. And then would it be actually worthwhile doing it in the first place? So the mindset around that is really important of, I'm bulking, yes, but I am being controlled in my bulking as I am with my surplus and my with my deficit and the calories that I'm eating on the other side of the coin. And that also brings me on to the size of the calorie surplus this is another really important point as well about if you are having a slight calorie surplus, maybe 200 calories a day, for example, then that's pretty healthy. I think that after a period of a number of weeks or months, then the calories that have produced fat out of that surplus will be able to come off fairly easily with a bit of knowledge, bit of discipline and proper execution. That wouldn't be a huge toll on the body at all, quite manageable, I feel. But as with the mindset of I'm in a bulk and therefore I will eat what I want, you've got to be careful when the calorie size goes a lot larger, because then that is the point whereby we are negating muscle gains during the fat loss process. That anything that you have gained, the body will be willing to get rid of it again because of the harsh deficit that you're putting the body into in order to get that fat off. The more that you gain through a larger surplus, and we're talking 600-700 calories here, will result in a large amount of fat gain, which will take a lot of effort to get off. Maybe it will put the body into starvation mode, and maybe you will lose that muscle that you've been fighting for. So the size of the surplus is really important as to what the net gain is likely to be when you have finished with the bulking phase and the subsequent deficit. And it does come down to an individual level as to what you can tolerate, not just the subsequent deficit that you'll be in and how you can tolerate that, but also the bulking phase itself is not always a lot of fun. I think it's great to think sometimes that you think, oh, you know, I'm going to go for 3 months here just eating what I want, or I'm going to be eating an extra 500, 600, 700 calories a day. Life is going to be glorious. But in actual fact, it's quite a bit different from that, because to eat enough food every day is quite challenging, especially if it's healthy food. If it's not healthy food, that's a different side of the coin, because if you're eating a lot of food every day and it's fairly unhealthy, you start disliking foods that would initially have given you pleasure. And you start thinking, I actually want a healthy food, or I actually don't want my next meal because I just don't feel good in myself. I would prefer to skip this meal and just have the next one, because your body is kind of clamoring for a bit of a break as to eating so much food. So it's quite an interesting mindset around all of that, where initially you think, great, and then as you get into it, you think, you know, another meal, you know, it's so soon. And what's this? A burger? I don't want one of those. I want broccoli, or I want a chicken breast, or I want steamed brown rice, because everyone loves a bit of steamed brown rice, don't they? So it's one of those things where things change over time. Your attitude will change, your mindset will change, your cravings will change, and it can become quite a challenge. And when it becomes a bit of a challenge, it's good to just take a bit of a break, even if you are within a defined period in which you're going to bulk for. Take a bit of a rest, go into a slight deficit at this stage, get that appetite back again, get those thoughts of I want broccoli and I want steamed brown rice to disappear from your mind, and let your body recover to the point where it again wants to eat more food and you're back on track again. And then think about how much your surplus is going to be going forward. If it provoked that response of not wanting food, it was probably too high. So then adjust it going forward to being a wee bit lower following that mini cut. Just adjust that mindset of yours to be able to proceed forward in a consistent manner, because that's what it's all about, is consistency. Finding that sweet spot, being consistent about it, executing it, and getting those goals. So moving on to the ratio aspect. This is one of the whole reasons why we do a bulk, is that You might go from 10% to 20% body fat. Is that acceptable? If you can handle it, fine. If you know you can lose that fat again, fine. And then you can rest assured that you will be able to keep that muscle at the end, fine. But if that ratio of muscle is far too low and you're gaining a lot of body fat for a very small amount of muscle gain, is that worthwhile? If it is still worthwhile, is it that amount that you want? You've really got to have a think about what the ratio is of muscle gain to fat gain, and then what the net result is once you've brought that body fat back down to that acceptable level that you like to be at or will accept. And the funny thing about this is that once you've done a bulk and cut once, which is often fairly easy, it's like the body is a very intelligent mechanism and it won't allow that to happen again so easily. Some of us might be lucky, and again, you might be a genetically gifted individual, in which case, great, good on you, go for it. But always bear in mind that the second time around and going forward that you do this process of bulking, it'll be a very different story, and you just got to be ready for that to be the case. And the funny thing is that when you're in that window of opportunity of it being your first time, most people do it without very much knowledge. Now imagine if you armed yourself with the knowledge and you knew how to execute this, and maybe you had a mentor to do it, and then you took advantage of the body's willingness to allow you to do it for the first time, then you can achieve some amazing results. But most people tend to gain the knowledge after they've done it once, and they realize what they did wrong the first time, and then from that point on, it's just hard work to do it. Quite a shame, really, but that's the way things go with trial and error, and the way that the body works. So a small surplus rather than a large one might be the way forward for you. And then another unique challenge of that is actually making sure that you are in a surplus. How are you going to actually make sure that you are? If you're only 150, 200 calories over your maintenance level every day, how are you going to make sure of that? Given all the activity that you may or may not do, your weight training sessions might be longer or more intense on some days. You might forget to have a meal. You might be traveling, you might be at a work do, whatever it is. Make sure you're tracking what you're doing and make sure that you are, in fact, in a surplus. Otherwise, you'll be yo-yoing between maintenance, surplus, and deficit, and that won't get you far at all. And in that case, you'll start questioning the whole concept of bulking, which you're right to do, but it might not be the culprit in that respect. Then the unproductive surplus, where people eat for the sake of eating. They just like to ram it all down their throat, try to get as much food as they can because they believe that will cause as much muscle growth as possible, which to some degree it's true depending on what your actual practices are. A ceiling will be in place whereby if you go above that ceiling, which will be different from everyone, then you will no longer experience additional muscle growth, but you'll most definitely experience more more fat accumulation. Then that is a very unproductive surplus because you're just simply going to gain nothing but fat. The muscle capacity has indeed been reached at that point. And then if your fat surplus is far too high, so your calorie surplus is far too high and your fat accumulation mirrors that, then you're at the point of wanting to come back down afterwards and burn that body fat. How much muscle is that going to cost you? And that's something that you really have to think about, because if your deficit is too harsh and for too long, it'll reflect like a yo-yo diet whereby the metabolism suffers. In which case you could have a more conservative deficit for a longer period of time. But then you could argue, was it that necessary to have that much fat accumulation in the first place? Would I have been better off and had the same muscle growth had I have had a more conservative surplus? And how do you know if the surplus is too much? Aside from the fact that you're getting fatter and fatter on a consistent basis, perhaps every day or week, you can tell that. But there are other telltale signs as well of just generally feeling uncomfortable, because you've got this fat accumulation happening. Your sleep is suffering, your energy levels are wavering, workouts are an effort. You can't get your bloody socks on without a battle. Tying your shoelaces is a bit of an effort, and you've got to park yourself somewhere to get in position to do that. Those kind of things are just an indication that your surplus is likely to be a little bit unproductive at that stage. And another thing along those lines is evaluating your surplus in order to know that it's too excessive. Your surplus, if you are feeling good in your energy levels and your strength is improving in the gym and you aren't reaching extreme levels of fatigue, or maybe not extreme, but just levels of fatigue that you otherwise aren't used to, then that's a good sign. If you can get through that and everything is feeling good, the minute that things start going the opposite direction, that is when you could argue that the surplus is unnecessary and your evaluation is negative. You need to make a change to make it positive. And of course, exercise itself, you can eat as much as you want, but your weight training has got to be on point. The technique, the form, the rest, the variance in exercises, all these things have really got to be on point during the surplus to take advantage of the period of time that you're going through. This is where your body is likely to respond the most because you're bulking and you're having a surplus. So make a good choice, make some good decisions, and have some really good on point workouts, good rest, recovery, form, technique. All of that needs to be on point for it to be worthwhile. And finally, internal feedback. That's a good way to, it's a good mechanism in which to make a few decisions. They're not the best mechanisms. More advanced trainees will be able to take advantage of this the most because more advanced trainees are used to these things, have a bit of a track record of noticing X, Y, and Z. New people or people that are in surpluses for the first time or just haven't been training for that long, it's a bit of an objective thing and it's not all that worthwhile taking notes a great deal of how you're feeling because that can vary from day to day. And plus, because if you're hydrated one day and you've lost a little bit of body fat perhaps because you weren't quite in that surplus that you thought you were for the last week or thereabouts, and your muscles are coming through a little bit more, you might put that down to a surplus and gaining more muscle mass rather than exposing a bit of definition. So things like that can just throw the objective decision out a little bit. Of that internal feedback isn't quite as reliable as you want it to be in that regard. So to tie all this up then, I would say nutrition, of course, is hugely important in terms of the surplus. Have a conservative surplus and go from there. Don't have an excessive surplus straight away. Look out for those signs. Get in the gym, and are you having good workouts? And if you are, fantastic. Keep it going, maybe add a few more calories and see if that feeling repeats itself. Otherwise, if you start feeling uncomfortable, food becomes less appealing, you're not that hungry, you're accumulating a bit of body fat, it probably means that your bulk is a little bit too excessive. And at the end of the day, that net muscle that we want to have after you've come down from your bulk and that deficit has paid off, we don't want to lose that muscle as a result of that. And you can either not have as much body fat accumulation in the first place so you don't have as much to lose, or if you do get to that stage, then you want to have a longer, less harsh or more conservative deficit over a longer period of time so that you can burn that body fat off and conserve the muscle. Hope there's been a benefit to you. Like, subscribe, comment if you would like to help the channel grow. I appreciate your support and thank you very much.